Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for standard best of 3. So traditional standard, if you're looking for standard best of 1, video was up yesterday. We will also have Explorer Historic for past weeks are all up there. We did a rundown of the Arena Championship Historic decks also up there. Shadows over Innistrad Remastered is coming out on Tuesday, so the day after this comes out. So there'll be an injection of cards into both Explorer and Historic, including some original Innistrad cards like Snapcaster Mage, Grizzlebrand, Huntmaster of the Fells, the first set I played Paper Magic with, so a lot of cool cards there. So from Tuesday onwards, I'm going to try to get out new content in terms of gameplay, and we'll be back to the next week with those formats in terms of how the meta kind of evolved there. But if you're tuning in for the first time here, what we do is we look at what the best decks are on the Arena ladder. We look at a site called UntapGG, which you see on the screen, that tracks win rate percentages. So this tracks its companion tool, runs alongside your Arena client, tracks your win rates, loss rates, deck collections. Link is in the bio if you want to get started. It's a really useful tool to kind of have as you go through your Arena journey. So we have the win rates from that. When it comes to standard best of 3 as well, we're going to look at the MTGO challenges and leagues, which are kind of paid tournaments that take place each week. So we'll look, sometimes we get slightly different metas there. It tends to be a little bit more spiky. So if you're looking for the best decks, it's a good resource there. And then we also look at some of the large tournaments. So Pizzabox MTG's streamer hosts a tournament 3 times a month. That usually has well over 100 people. It's a great resource for competitive tournament style Magic. So that tournament's going on right now. They're free tournaments with cash prizes. That one's currently in, I think, round 7, but we'll take a look to see what some of those lists are there as well. So we'll jump into these lists in a sec. Just a quick programming note. I am on a quest for 10,000 subs on the channel, closing in on 8,000. If you haven't subbed to the channel, if you enjoy this type of content, we come out every week giving you the latest data in terms of what is the best deck. It's free to sub. Please help out the channel. If you've already subbed, thank you. Likes and comments always go a long way as well, and they're much appreciated. I respond to every comment that I try to, and the likes, just it helps out the channel. So it is much appreciated. So jumping into it, we are looking standard best of 3, March 12th through to the 19th, Diamond to Mythic rank, 22,000 matches. So this is 44 to 66,000 games of Magic played. So we're going to jump into it. All the deck lists I'll paste in the video description, so don't worry, you don't have to copy paste or write everything down. You can easily copy paste it. So Azorius Soldiers is the top performing deck in Diamond to Mythic rank, at least on the Arena ladder. This is an interesting kind of flash-based version of the deck that we haven't really seen. It's a 67% win rate, still on the 24 lands, but there's no Brutal Cathar in this version. There's no 3-drop that puts counters on things. It's got a flash package with Zephyr Sentinel, which could enter the battlefield. You could return another soldier to your hand, so you can kind of blank removal or reset enter the battlefield effects, stuff like Resolute Reinforcements, for example. And if you do, it gets a counter. It's also flash, so you could basically become a 3-2 flash flyer. By playing at flash speed, you also unlock yourself to be able to do things like Protect the Negotiators as a counter, Make Disappear, Destroy Evil, as well as the Wandering Emperor. So kind of a cool innovation in this particular list itself. It also lets you kind of hold up mana, so you can either make counter or like draw cards with this Sure Strike, or kind of play to the board. The Resolute Reinforcements is also a flash threat. And then you have your 1-drops in Recruitment Officer. Holding up the mana also lets you give the option to kind of just pseudo-draw a card with the Recruitment Officer. You still have your Denix for Lifelink, Graveyard Hate, Second Body, Harbin as a way to kind of go over the top with the Anthem effect. Valiant Veteran buffs up all your squad as well. Notably no Thalia in this version either, because you're playing a higher density of spells. This version's finally playing Seachrome Coast. So many of the versions were still just playing like Basic Island and just play the dual lands. They're good. This version also, interestingly, is playing Myrex. So just another mana sink. While you do have Fortified Beachhead in the mana base, you do also have access to the Myrex as another way to kind of just keep putting pressure, especially at flash speed. If your opponent doesn't, say, play into a counterspell, you can just make a creature to keep attacking. While you're likely not going to win with poison damage, it's just still more damage you can push through with your cards. You can put counters on it, all that jazz. The sideboard's pretty clean here. So you have Destroy Evil, Enchantment, and just big things destruction. The Lantern Flare, while you won't cast it for its cleave cost, it's just basically 2 mana, deal damage. X, where X is the number of creatures you control. This deck's going to be producing a lot of creatures, so it's just another flexible removal spell. Got Brutal Cathars, Knockout Blows for like your red decks, and then you have your Toskia's Welcome for the grindier matchups, makes it so any creature you cast once per turn, especially with the flash creatures, you can kind of get on both turns, draws you cards that way there. So interesting kind of adaptation of the Azorius Soldiers deck. We then move to Esper Midrange, Esper Legends. And I'll preface, there's a lot of different ways to build this particular deck. Give me one sec. So this version here was one that came up about a week ago now in the Napoli RC from a lot of the Channel Fireball crew. And it's kind of a throwback to the wedding announcement version. So they built this, from what I was reading, to combat against like the Grixis, the Rakdos, kind of the mid-range shells. So you have Wedding Announcement, which gives you a lot of bodies. It also insulates you against Invoke Despair. Then you have Razorlash Transmogrant, which allows you to keep having a threat that keeps coming back from the graveyard for 2 mana against the decks with greedy mana bases. An example, this deck plays no basics, so you can easily get this back for repeatedly 2 mana. You're playing a Legends deck, so you have Plaza Heroes to take advantage of, as well as a higher number. You'll notice these Channel Lands. There's 28 lands in this deck, but in part you're playing these because they're spells that also can help you hit your land drops. And they all get pretty much reduced to 1 mana, given that you have such a density of Legends. Skreld for protection, and Pseudo Unblockable. Denick for lifelink, 2 bodies, Graveyard Hate. You have Go for the Throat as your only removal in the main. Ludwig is a way to kind of fill your graveyard, and then it could kind of become another copy of a creature in your graveyard. You're conniving a lot of things, so it's a good late game kind of mana sink. 2/3 body on its own is not bad either. Thalia as just tax effect. You're pretty much all humans, or sorry, all creatures. So the tax is going to hurt your opponent, likely more than yourself. Adeline, just go wide ability. Rafine goes over the top. Lets you kind of filter through your deck. And the big thing with these Esper decks, you see a lot of cards in this deck, so you can often find like that key answer, the key card that you need in a particular situation. It also plays really nicely with Shieldred because you can gain a lot of life. In the sideboard, Cut Down and Malicious Malfunction for your more aggressive slanted decks. Lauren's really good against like Rakdos with like Bank Busters, Fable the Mirror Breakers, incidental things like that. Maybe Graveyard, or like a the Hearse for Graveyard Hate if they might consider bringing that in against you. But it's also good against Mono White, the mid-range shells. Go for the Throat, Destroy Evil's more removal, and the Thankful Stroke versus the big mana decks. We then move to Mono Red Aggro, and this deck hasn't seen too much innovation over the last week. Really what we're just seeing is shaving down 1 Phoenix Chick for Reckless Impulse, just a little bit more card advantage. This deck's looking to go fairly aggressive and curve out. You have a lot of hasty threats in Monastery Swiftspear, Phoenix Chick, Bloodthirsty Adversary, Feldon, Squee, and Thundering Raiju. Literally every creature has haste in this deck now that you actually look at it. So you're trying to turn things sideways and hit hard. You also have the Shivan Devastator as a one-of. Lots of burn-based removal, Strangle, Play with Fire, Lightning Strike, all can be flashback with Bloodthirsty. And Kumano is just kind of that, every little thing it does is incidental, but the fact that it comes all in a 1-drop and gives you, like, the biggest thing I think with Kumano is the text on the creature side. When a creature dies, it gets exiled instead from your opponent. Oftentimes really screws up like death triggers and stuff like that. Mana base has some utility lands in Sokuzen and Mishra's Foundry. Your sideboard, you got the Obliterating Bolt as just kind of scalable removal to 4 damage with Exile condition. Bloody Betrayals if you run into Traxa, Shieldreds, any of the big decks. Brotherhood's End is brought in against, like, say that Soldiers deck or Go Wide deck that's like even the Toxic deck, which we'll get to, is a really good kind of catch-up mechanic for you. The Furnace Punisher is a card that we've actually seen even some numbers in the main board on some of the MTGO leagues, and just what I've seen like on Twitter from like the regional championships, like the in-store play. This is really good against any deck with like a lot of non-basics. So like the Esper deck we just looked at, some of the Grixis decks, they're not playing a large amount of basics, so it does 2 damage on their upkeep. It's also harder to block if they only have a single creature, given the menace. It also doesn't get hit by Cut Down, where the Squee gets hit by Cut Down. So some of the considerations there. Rending Flame is just pick your 5 damage removal spell. The Rending Flame has a little bit more upside in the fact that it could hit like spirits to deal some damage. Jaya's just as a grindier card there. We then move to, did I copy Esper Midrange twice? I copied Esper Midrange twice. So ignore Esper Midrange there because I already got Esper Midrange. Then we have Rakdos. So this one's an interesting one. So a couple decks that have been coming up, and we'll see some variations. This is like the love child of what if we had mono black aggro and mono red aggro, and they had a love child, and you get Rakdos aggro. So what do we have at a mono red? We have the Kumanos, the Swiftspears, Play with Fires, the Bloodthirsty Adversaries. Then you take the elements of the mono black aggro, so you get hard removal and cut downs, go for the throats. Get Blood Tithe Harvester since you're on Rakdos now. Graveyard Trespasser as a hard to kill threat, gain some life. Eat the Graveyard, Shieldred on the top end, Fable the Mirror Breakers, and an Abrade mixed in. So just kind of a more aggressively slanted deck in Rakdos. Some of these decks I've seen play Archfiend of Dross, the 4-mana 6/6 with oil counters. So interesting kind of card there. Sideboard, you have Hand Hate, smattering of extra removal and Abrades, and go for the throats. Then Treads Mogrants versus, like I said, any of those greedy mana-based decks, Bankbuster for the Grindier matchup, Soul Transfer, Catch-All removal, and then Vampire's Vengeance as a sweeper. If you'll notice a lot, so you cast this, it already gives you prowess, so your Swiftspear doesn't die. Your Bloodthirsty and your Blood Tithe Harvester both are vampires, so they don't get hit, and then your other threats are bigger that they don't get hit either. So it's oftentimes a one-sided board wipe, and it is instant speed, so you can kind of hit your opponent at instant speed, which is kind of cool tech in this deck here. We then go to Selesnya Toxic at 58% win rate. Another deck that's had a couple variations, and I've been seeing more recently the addition of cards like Audacity. Because you only have to deal 1 point of damage for the Toxic to actually work, being able to kind of throw on some extra power with the Trample could often help with cases like Jawbone Duelist, or even like the Slaughter Stinger that gives you the boost. So you're trying to Toxic out your opponent with either combat damage, or you have kind of the backup plan with the Venerated Rot Priest with targeting your creatures. So you can target your own creatures with like Audacity, Tyvar Stand, Valor Stands kind of mixed into there. Or if your opponent targets your creatures, they also get poison damage. And then you have Skrull's Hive to make you a bunch of mites, as well as if your opponent's corrupted with 3 toxic or poison counters, all your toxic creatures, so every creature in your deck, basically gets a lifelink. This deck has utility cards in Myrex to make a bunch of tokens, and Seed Core to pump up your little dorks. The sideboard, you have Destroy Evil as catch-all removal for bigger stuff and enchantments. Malira in both heavy removal matchups to get stuff back, but it's also the Mirror Breaker in the poison matchup because you can prevent your opponent from dealing more than 1 poison at a time. Annex Entry is kind of catch-all removal for some decks. Knockout Blow for the red deck. Touch of the Spirit Realm could be used both offensively and defensively in terms of removal, and against the Rakdos decks, you have the Wedding Announcements included in there. Or like, when I say Rakdos, I mean like red-black mid-range shell kind of thing, kind of playing into that regard. We then go to Mono White Midrange. So this is a deck 57% win rate. That's actually a lot more popular on MTGO than it seems like it's on the ladder. We'll see as we go through the list. Another deck that's got a lot of variations in terms of the cards that are included, but the core of the deck is using a heavy white-based mana. It's actually interesting with this version here. We see them, and we'll see on the MTGO, there's no copies of Ossification in the main board, and that's one of the big payoffs in terms of playing this deck, is because you're on a lot of basics. You can use Ossification as a catch-all removal for 2 mana for planeswalkers and creatures. This version is on Farewell, so it does kind of counteract that, but in the same accord, you're playing Wedding Announcement, Restorations, so even they usually play the 2-drop that fetches a planes, but a different kind of configuration here. So it's kind of just a mid-range shell, lots of 2-for-1, card advantage values. Sarah Paragon can recast a bunch of these things. You have a Planeswalker package on the top end of like Wandering Emperor, Elspeth Resplendent, and Eternal Wanderer. Farewell is a sweeper, and then Sanctuary Warden. The full 8 blow up your lands. So this one's on kind of more of a land destruction kind of theme. We saw against that Esper deck, they have no basics, so you can just strip mine your opponent, and then the Roadside Reliquary to draw some cards. We do see Ossification in the sideboard in this particular list with some Fateful Absence, Skrull's Hive for the grindier matchups, the Rakdos matchups, stuff like that. I've also seen some of these mono white lists played the Myrex. for the grindier matchups as well. Aggressive decks, you have Sunset Revelry, Graveyard Hate, Lauren to blow up artifacts, enchantments to populate for the aggressive decks, and another Elspeth for the grindier matchups. So then pivoting over to the standard challenge. So I'm not going to go through every list, but this one here, first place was won by Grixis. So it's a 3 invoke, 1 Gix command, Blood Tithe, Corpse, and Sheoldred mixed into here. We actually didn't have too much representation when I actually looked at it in terms of Grixis midrange on the ladder. Yeah, Grixis was down to 55% win rate. But it was doing better like on the MTGO leagues. There's a lot of ways you can build Grixis to kind of combat the meta. See another mono white. This version's on a Might and Meekstone in the main. We see the ossifications like I mentioned. This one's on 3 field for Roadside Reliquaries, but it has a copy of Depopulate Farewell main, and then the Steel Seraphs, which you sometimes see in these. The Ambitious Farmhand was the card I was mentioning. Another copy here. You have like AO in this version. So there's a lot of different kind of configurations to how you want to kind of play it out. I actually really like the ossifications in the main. I think it's a good catch-all removal. Also indirectly insulates you against some of the Invoke Despair shenanigans. So this is Rakdos. Yeah, so this is Grixis. But with Razor Slash main, no Sheoldred in the main, 2 Sheoldreds in the sides. So you see kind of the different configurations that there can be with the Grixis. Various copies of the Esper Legends decks. There's a more 2-drop aggressive version with like Thalias. You have to lose to get cards that you connive back. Guardian Nubenalia, the Razor Slash main. A couple copies of Gix in here with like Kaido Wandering Emperor sideboard plan. Another copy of like the Grixis deck. Another Esper, you have a mono blue that made an appearance here. Just a lot of counters with your Hadijin Tolarian Terror kind of top end. More Esper. This is a version of the Rakdos deck. Nope, Grixis still. Grixis in here. Usually it's a Grixis for counters. Another version of the mono white deck with all the kind of blow up your land style effects. This version's actually playing some copies of Kaya and Vraska in here as well. So you see the Shatter and Sanctum, Rafine's Tower, Cave Koilos. So kind of an Orzhov version, basically mono white splash the black planeswalkers, and some hard removal in the sideboard. This is another version of like showing the Rakdos kind of aggro deck that we saw that was showing up. So you can kind of take a look, see what jumps out to you. There's a Katos Urtai deck here with like Esper control kind of thing. So there's quite a few cool decks here. You can take a look, see what jumps out to you, what you want to play. I'll list this all out here. And then with the pizza box open, let me just see if a round had ended. This one had 109 participants playing in it. And currently Sonio is 7-0 with a Jeskai control that came close to top 8 last week when I was doing commentary on it. But Sonio is another streamer, does a lot of control content. So 4 Jace Perfected Mind, 4 Wandering Emperor, Teferi Souls of Sunset, AO in here. Spattering of removal counters kind of mixed into there. So interesting kind of shell here if you want to take a look, more of a control style shell. You have Toxic, Mono White Midrange. Yushi went 10-0 last week with the list. We see the Rakdos Aggro list. This one's got like Archfiend, Swiftspear Squeeze in here, a copy of Razor Slash. So seeing more of this Rakdos Aggro deck come up. 5-color control. This is the Atraxa domain deck. So you got like Leyline Bindings in here, some Planeswalkers, Fable, Kami War, Drag to the Bottom is in here, Herd Migration. I think Martin played last week, had a good showing, just missed out on top 4, I think. But you can take a look here too. There's like Golgari Planeswalkers at 5 and 2 with a fight rigging kind of deck. Lots of cool kind of decks in here too. So take a look, see what jumps out, what doesn't. Last week we had a lot of mono black kind of show up, and we're seeing kind of a turn of more of these mono white midrange and then Rakdos aggro and kind of these multicolor kind of control mid-range shells play into this. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you think. Like I said, this week I'm going to be focusing more on content for the new set dropping. and then we'll come up with new meta videos. If you're looking for best of one, it's up already. And as always, if you can, liking, commenting, and subscribing helps out the channel, all for free. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.